Welcome to Losing a Child, Always Andy's Mom. On this podcast, we journey through the devastating experience of the death of a child. Grief is seldom discussed openly in our culture, and the death of a child makes people feel even more uncomfortable. We approach the topic openly and honestly, speaking to people who have lost loved ones and experts who help care for them. Whether you are a parent experiencing loss or someone who wants to support another going through this tragedy, this podcast strives to offer hope and help.
Thank you so much, Valerie, for agreeing to come on the podcast today. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, I'm excited to be here and tell you our story and, everything about Christian.
Yeah. Why don't you start out by just talking about Christian and who he was like as a kid?
So I had Christian when I was 19. So I was very, very young. So in many ways, we kind of grew up together in some ways, and I look back and I wonder, gosh, I could have done things so much differently, but he was, my baby. He was the first grandbaby. He was the first nephew. I mean, he was everybody's baby.
Yeah.
As a kid, Christian we used to kind of not really make fun of him, but he was like a little ball of anxiety. Like he just always thought like the worst of everything. Like it was going to be the worst situation. He was kind of a chubby kid. So through elementary school and part of middle school, he kind of struggled, finding who he was, like finding his friend group.
Mm-hmm.
As he got older, he kind of would tell me that he was bullied a little as a child. I didn't really ever hear much about that, but I'm sure it happened. I mean, kids, he was a little chubby. But when he got to middle school, I actually remarried and we moved and he started a new school. He found his group and he just blossomed from middle school to high school. He had his friend group and I don't want to paint a picture that Christian was a perfect kid because my God, he and I really went at it. I mean, he was a teenager, 100%. Christian wanted to do exactly what Christian wanted to do. And, Christian would always say, well, I can't wait till I'm turning 18. I'm going to move into my own house and, all this stuff. And it's like, I really hope your life turns out the way that you want it to, because you've got a plan. Let me tell you.
Isn't it funny how they think they know absolutely everything then and you're an idiot? And then I think when they hit about their mid-20s or so, they realize, I guess, that maybe you were smarter than what they think. I think my 22-year-old foster son is still not quite there yet. I'm don't know anything, but pretty soon I'm hoping.
Right.
I'm hoping.
And, looking back at me, it took me a while, to really appreciate my mom, So I get it. But Christian and I, when I got remarried, it was tough on him because it was always just me, him, and my younger son. I mean, we didn't have anybody else. So he was kind of, I don't really know the words to describe it, but I mean, he wasn't like mean or anything. I just know that it kind of, because it wasn't just me, the three of us anymore. Like there was someone else we were bringing in to live with us. And I mean, it had always just been because I was a single mom. So it had always just been the three of us.
Right.
So Kristen and I kind of did go back a little before I was actually married. We had our issues, and not to get too much into that, but we went to therapy. And, one of the things that they told us was that she said, Christian knows that you're always going to be there, so you're kind of his person to kind of lash out, not really, not in like a physical way, but just like emotionally, like, cause they're like, that he knows that you will never give up on him, that you will always be his person. So we did argue a lot, and I would call him a jerk, and he would say, "Oh, way to go, Mom, call your kid a jerk." So looking back at that, I really regret that. But
you know what, though? I talk to families about that a lot because I have a lot of moms, especially that come in and they're very bothered by either their relationship with their teen or all of their kids' relationships with each other. And I tell them that exact same thing. I said, why he can treat you so badly and why he can treat his brother so badly is because he knows they're always going to be there. Right. If he treated his friends like that, they would just dump him and they'd be done. So it's like, it's only because he feels so confident in your love and in your support for him unconditionally that he feels able to lash out. So I always tell him that, it's horrible to have to live that way, but in some ways it's a little bit of a compliment, right? Because they feel secure in their relationship, right? Either with their siblings or with their parents. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and it was the same thing with my younger son and him. Jaden is his name, and Christian would just kind of, especially if he had friends around, he would kind of pick on Jaden a little. Yeah. And his friends would always say, "Why are you so mean to your little brother?" And so Jaden, and I have that conversation with Jaden a lot now. I say, Christian really loved you. I mean, Christian could pick on you, but nobody else was going to pick on you around Christian. I can promise you that.
Exactly right.
Even me, if I fussed at Jaden, Christian would have been like, "Mom,"
Yeah.
But no. So I know that he loved us very, very much. And I know that he was just very confident and that I was never going to give up on him, regardless of any choices that he made. Like, I would always be there for him. But he blossomed. He had so many friends and so many people loved him. And he was just such a great, great kid.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Wonderful.
Yeah.
So do you want to go into now what happened?
Yeah. So on March the 29th, it was actually the Thursday. It was 2018. So it was the Thursday before Good Friday. Jaden was going to go to his dad's house for the weekend, and it's about an hour away. I had actually asked Christian to take him because I was at work, and Christian was not going to stay because Christian, he had big plans with his friends. It was a long weekend. They're out of school. Mm-hmm. So Christian actually took a friend with him so that he couldn't be talked into staying. Because he was like, I really didn't think much about it. I mean, it was an interstate, but not really in the city. It's kind of in between Memphis and Jackson, Tennessee. So it's kind of just straight highway, not really big cities. It's just an interstate,
And how old was Christian at the time?
Christian was 16 at the time. Mm-hmm. Jaden was in the car with him. Jaden was 13. Well, at the time was 13. And then his best friend, Jonathan, was with him. And Jonathan was in the front passenger seat and Jaden was behind Christian, in the back seat. So it was afternoon, probably about 5:00. They went out. Funny story, right before that, though, Christian had called me about an hour before. It was like 3:30, 4:00 in the afternoon. He said, "We're going to go out to eat, and you're going to pay for it." Because of course he had my debit card.
Yeah.
They went to a Chinese buffet, and it was like, "Christian, it's 3:30 in the afternoon. Like, what on earth are y'all going to a Chinese buffet?" But whatever, fine, I don't care. And he says, "Well, Jonathan, can you pay for Jonathan's too?" And I said, "Sure." Great. So they all went out to eat, and then they went on this journey. I was actually, and we feel guilty about the craziest, silliest things, and I realized. So I was actually in the tub getting ready because me and my husband, it was kind of drizzling a little, but it was supposed to be a pretty afternoon. So I was looking forward to going out and having some drinks on a patio. I was like, I don't have any kids for the weekend. I'm going to go have a drink on the patio.
Right. Because you just got out of work or something. Mm-hmm.
Yes, I had just gotten on. And I actually was in the tub, getting ready to go out. And this number kept calling me. But unfortunately, this day and time, when a number that doesn't call you, it's usually about a car warranty or something ridiculous, that you don't know. So I kept ignoring it, and they kept calling. So eventually I answered. I think they had called 6 or 7 times, and then I answered it. And it was a lady. Her name was Amber on the other line. And she said, "Valerie," she said, "there's been an accident and your son is dead."
Oh, my word.
And I immediately said, and again, guilt, I said, "Please tell me that Jaden is alive." Mm-hmm. Only because I knew if Christian had killed Jaden,
yes,
I would have lost Christian
them both.
too.
Yeah.
Christian would not have been able to live with that if he would have killed Jonathan or Jaden because they were both in the car. And she didn't know their names, and she says, "Well, I have one of them here with me." And she put Jaden on the phone. They had not told Jaden that Christian had passed away, but they would not let Jaden go to where Christian was. So what happened was it is believed that Christian fell asleep while he was driving. Mm-hmm. And doesn't make a lot of sense, but insurance and stuff went through and he wasn't on his cell phone. Thank goodness for that. But Jonathan said that he had kind of dozed off a couple times, but he was like, I'm fine. He had fell asleep overcorrected and the vehicle flipped. And Christian was not wearing a seatbelt.
Mm-hmm.
So Christian was ejected from the vehicle and died immediately at the side of the scene. Jonathan and Jaden both had on their seatbelts, so they both survived. Apparently, there was a big group of people who ran to the car, busted the window out, got Jonathan and Jaden out of the car, but they would not let them go to where Christian was because they knew that he was gone. A couple of things. People always are like, I can't believe she told you over the phone. Mm-hmm. But me being a single mom, I have never wanted anybody's help. I've always just liked to do things on my own and not ask for help. Had I not known that Christian had died at the scene, I would have went by myself to the hospital. I just would have, I just wouldn't have asked anybody to come, and I just would have went alone. And because I'm one of those people who I just like to fix things myself, so, mm-hmm. which is a fault of mine.
Definitely something that has been challenged, I'm sure, since.
Yeah. Absolutely. Mm-hmm. So I just remember I kind of was numb. I didn't cry or anything at that time, just because I think I was just kind of in shock. Like I was just in complete shock. I was home alone. My husband was still at work. I kept trying to call. He works in the restaurant industry, so it's crazy. Thursday night before holidays, so I'm sure it was crazy. And they would never put him on the phone. Well, his parents live about a half a mile from us. So I walked into their house and said, there was a car accident. Christian's dead. We need to leave. Like exactly like that.
Yep.
And they jumped up and were like, oh gosh, what, they were just kind of.
Isn't it funny? I did the exact same thing. I called people, of course, because I was on the freeway. Right. And my exact words were, for every single person, there's been an accident and he's dead. Right. And I just said it just like that. And right. Every single person said, what? And then I had to repeat it. But I was like, I didn't want there to be any ambiguity to the fact that Andy is dead. And that is like the number one most important thing of anything. And I didn't want anyone to say, are you okay? Is everybody okay? Whatever. I didn't even want that question asked of me. So that's why, it might seem weird to other people too, that I would just be like, there's been an accident, Andy's dead, so matter-of-factly. But it was just like, I had to say it like that because I didn't want to answer questions, really. You know what I mean?
Exactly.
So it makes total sense to me that you would just like go out there in that way. And yeah. Mm-hmm.
So then his mom, my mother-in-law, took me to where my husband John was working, and I walked into there and basically the exact same way. And he was in shock, and he just kind of looked around and was like, I have to leave, and everybody's like, what's going on? And he's like, I really don't know, I was just like, we got to go. Because we're an hour away from my kids.
Yeah.
So it's, it's awful. And then I called my brother, who I'm very close with my siblings, but my brother is much like Christian. He's kind of a ball of anxiety. So why on earth I thought my brother, so I called him and I said, hey, Christian's dead. There was an accident. They're in Jackson at this hospital, and I need you to call mom and my sister Leslie, because I cannot tell them. There's no way I can tell them.
Oh yeah. I totally get it. Yep.
Yeah. So I think of course, I wasn't present for that, but my sister-in-law was driving with my brother, and she said she had to pull over. He had to throw up a couple times, and then he was able to call my sister and my mom, because he, it's just something that you don't think that's ever going to happen.
No.
So anyway, we get to the hospital. My family, is on the way too. So we weren't there very long before, and they put us in this room. I'm guessing, looking back, there was some confusion that I had another kid that was alive at the hospital, because they told me I had to wait in this room. And it was like, I need to see my kid. I wasn't talking about Christian. I was talking about Jaden, the one that was alive,
Yeah.
And they were like, no. You got to stay here until a doctor comes in. And I was like, I know my kid's dead, and again, I hate to be so, it seems like I'm so insensitive, but it was just like, I need to get to my other kid. And it was probably 15 minutes before someone would listen to me. They put me in this room. My family has showed up by this point. My mom, was a wreck. I wasn't erect at this point because I was still just in complete shock. But seeing my mom, whew, she was just a mess. She came in and they're like, who told you? So we're all in the room and the doctors and the nurses came in and they said, who told you your kid was dead? Like, nobody should have told you that. And so then my mom kind of perked up and was like, oh, is he not dead? And I said, no, Mom, he's dead. I was like, and I kind of regret that too, because I probably wasn't very, sincere to her, but I was just like, I didn't want anybody in that room to have because there was no reason for anybody to have lied to me about that.
No.
So I knew it. I knew it in my heart. It was real. Then finally a nurse said, oh, the other kid is yours too. Oh, well, come. And they let me in the room with Jaden. And this was probably 20 minutes at this point.
Yeah.
Me and my husband, we went in the room where Jaden was, and Jaden was 13 at the time. So sweet Jaden. He's all banged up. He's just a mess. He had a broken collarbone. He's all bruised and banged up. And he asked us about everybody, from the dog to the, he's like, what's Rose? Rose is our Chihuahua. What's Rosa doing? He asked about everybody but Christian.
Yeah.
So no one had told him, but he knew. Yeah. And I said, Jaden, I have to tell you something. And he said, I think I already know. And I said, well, but I have to say it because you're going to have to hear it. And I said, Christian died in the car accident. And he said, yeah, they wouldn't let me go to him. So I figured he was dead.
Yeah. That so reminds me of Peter, because no one told Peter.
Right.
Ever. They made sure to separate us before they told my husband and me. But they put Peter in a separate ambulance. And then I did have to tell him, but honestly, he knew. I mean, because he was watching them do CPR. He knew.
Right.
He knew. He saw him dead. But, but still, to be the one to say it is really hard. It's really hard. Yeah. Hardest thing I've ever done, I think, is to actually say those words out loud to my son. Mm-hmm.
Right. For sure.
Yeah.
And then I had to go to see Jonathan, was Jonathan's Christian's best friend. And Jonathan was a couple doors down from Jaden. So I asked if I could go see him. And then I had to tell Jonathan as well that, Christian was dead. And Jonathan, Jonathan and Christian had such a bond, and Jonathan's kind of one of my bonus kids now. I have lots of them, but Jonathan's kind of I have a huge connection. I just feel so much for Jonathan because I saw him break, in that moment. He was just heartbroken and, he was just devastated. And I think Jaden, of course, Jaden was devastated too, but Jaden was kind of in shock and a little younger and probably didn't really understand everything that was going on around him, because Jaden's body was kind of in shock. He was in the hospital for several days after that. But Jonathan only had like a eye injury. So he got to go home that night from there. And he was just broken. And that's, looking back at Jonathan, it was tough. I mean, that was so hard on me to have to tell him, that his best friend, they had like found their people. It was just devastating. And then, so it had started to drizzle a little and they wanted to fly Jaden to Le Bonheur Hospital here in Memphis, but they had to take him in an ambulance. So of course I had to leave the hospital without Christian, which was the hardest thing. Mm-hmm. A couple of things that I know everyone's different. My mom said, I want to see Christian. Mm-hmm. And I begged her. I said, Mom, please no. Like I can't, but I don't want you to go in there by yourself, but I can't see him. Mm-hmm. So she agreed with me. And so we did not see him there. So, in some ways it's like, you just.
Yeah. Yeah, I know. For Andy's body wasn't even taken to the same hospital that we went to. Andy's body was taken to a different hospital where they had the morgue and the coroner. So I wasn't allowed to see him either. I didn't see him until a couple days later at the funeral home.
Right.
And you don't know what's best, right? And like for a split second, I wish that they'd have let me out of that stupid ambulance and I could have held him one more time, right?
Right.
But I know it would have been really bad to see, but yet it's so hard to know. It's so hard to know.
Right. To know if you made that, right decision, and you just think, I could have at least said bye, but I chose not to, but I I was just terrified of what I would see.
Yeah. Yep.
And especially, like I told you, my mom was a wreck. So not wanting her to have that too, to that memory, like I didn't want her to have that memory. So it was just awful. So we had to leave. And my husband went in the ambulance with Jaden because my husband and Jaden are very, very close. My husband went in the ambulance with Jaden and I rode with my mother-in-law back to Memphis to get my car because she drove me there. And then I drove to the hospital alone from there to go get to Jaden. I don't think I slept. Jaden was in the hospital from that Thursday night. And he got to come home Sunday. He had a broken collarbone, but other than that, there was really nothing wrong with him. They just I think his body was just in shock. Like he couldn't eat. He was in a lot of pain and they really just wanted to make sure that everything was okay. He had bruises across his stomach from the seatbelt. So, they just wanted to just make sure he didn't have any internal things going on. Mm-hmm. But he got to come home Sunday night. Those hospital days were just awful, because unfortunately, you have so much you have to do because you have a funeral to plan and you're having to leave your kid at the hospital to go plan a funeral for your other kid. And it's just so much, is going on around you. And unfortunately, the world doesn't stop.
Yeah.
Just because your world did, nobody else's does. Everything's continuing around you. So you have to go to the grocery store. You need milk and there's all sorts of stuff that you have to do. So I had a great family and, my sister lives in Alabama. So she had to come into town and she came the next morning and that was just awful. But, she came to help me plan a funeral for my baby. And so we did all the things, we went through all the motions. We went to several funeral homes until we felt something was right. I actually had him buried right down the street from my mom. My mom lives about 45 minutes from me, but I knew she would go visit. I think that first year I know the first couple of months, I think she went and visited him every day. Mm-hmm. And she will actually be buried next to Christian. So, and I wanted to kind of put him somewhere close so that his friends could visit, but they're about 45 minutes away, and I'll get into that, but they have visited a lot still. Those kids are just amazing. And so a little about one other story about Christian that kind of goes along with his funeral. Christian's biracial. He was biracial. His father is African-American. I am Caucasian. And he told everybody he was Hawaiian. I don't know why. But, the thought of me having some, great fling with some Hawaiian guy, I don't know, whatever. And it's kind of funny because the Christmas before Christian passed away, me and my husband were in Nashville and we were shopping. And I said, he loved pineapples, like pineapple shirts and just weird. That's just who he was. And I was looking for a pineapple shirt at this mall in Nashville. And this guy said, yeah, like we don't have any pineapple shirts. Like that's odd. And I was like, okay. I was like, I know it's a weird request, but that's what I really wanted to get him for Christmas, but whatever, I'll order something online. So I actually had to order something online because you could not find a pineapple shirt anywhere. So Christian's funeral, I was thinking I didn't want an open casket, but they were going to let me decide. So we got to go in and see him before anybody got there. And my mom and my sister were standing beside me and they all said, it's better than what we had imagined, in our heads. Because we always just.
Yeah, you imagine the worst. Mm-hmm.
Right. So they talked to me, they're like, I think that the kids will need that, so that's what we did. We had an open casket. Mm-hmm. There were hundreds and hundreds of people at Christian's funeral. At one point before the funeral, everybody's coming through with the visitation and this girl comes up to me and she says, Miss Valerie, is it okay if we bring in some pineapples? And I said, yeah, sure. I'm thinking it's just a couple pineapples.
Yeah.
This whole group of kids get up and go outside. They had went all around Memphis and bought up all these pineapples. We probably had, in my mind, probably 50, 60, 70 pineapples. So we were putting them all around the funeral home. Like they were in Christian's casket. They were in top. Like we just decorated the whole funeral home. So nobody that was Christian's friend understood, but I was just like, I don't care. This funeral is really for his friends, because they, it was about them. They were who spoke, it was 100% about them because they were who he was. 100%. That's who he was. So we had pineapples everywhere. It was just the funniest thing. And now I swear to you, ever since Christian died, you could find a pineapple shirt anywhere. I mean, like that summer, everything was pineapple. So I was just like, you know what? Like if that was what Christian wanted his symbol to be, a pineapple is very popular right now. They have men's shirts everywhere with pineapples on them now. And I promise you, I could not find a pineapple shirt 4 months prior to his accident. And immediately after, you could find a pineapple shirt in any store that you wanted it. So it was just really funny.
My son Peter loves pineapples to the point where everyone at school, so all my kids went to a Spanish immersion elementary school, so they only spoke Spanish.
Right.
And his nickname, they didn't call him Peter, they called him Piña. And piña is the Spanish word for pineapple. So for an entire year, he was Piña. And then the next year, he was Pedro Piña. And we still will sometimes, his sister will call him Pedro Piña. And she made him for Christmas one year a stuffed pineapple. She sewed it and put it together. And it was, I can't remember what she called it. Something. Oh, Pineapple Bob. So he has a Pineapple Bob little stuffed animal. So pineapple is big in our family too, actually. It's kind of funny.
Right. So now everybody gives me pineapples. I mean, I have pineapple jewelry. I have pineapple stuff. I mean, I have so much stuff. But Christian's funeral, all his friends, of course, we're all devastated. I remember my grandmother, who I guess it's a generational thing. There's a certain way you're supposed to act at a funeral or a visitation. And she kept telling me I wasn't standing where I needed to stand, because you're supposed to stand by the casket. But when I would see one of Christian's friends, to the side of me on the ground breaking down, I would have to go to them. So I was just kind of all over the place. And my brother, again, who is a very anxious person, he told my grandmother he said, leave her alone. Nothing that she is doing is a right way to do any of this. She's fine. So it was just kind of funny. I mean, just that, there's supposed to be there's not a right way to bury your kid. There's not a right way to act at a funeral for your 16-year-old baby. It's just, there's no such thing as a right way to do anything. And I think it's very important what you're doing with this podcast, just because so many people you feel like you're not doing things the right way.
Yeah.
Everybody's right way is so different. Mm-hmm. Because after Christian's funeral, I had my friend Sharon, she came to the house and she packed up Christian's room because that's what I needed. And I know that's not what everybody needs, and now I look back and it's like, I packed up his room the next day just because I needed that. I didn't give away any of his stuff. I still have all his shirts. It's actually funny. And I know my mom's going to listen to this, but I actually ordered my mom one of those quilts, a t-shirt that's made out of t-shirts. I ordered my mom one of those quilts and I still have not been able to send in his t-shirts.
Same. I have a friend that has volunteered to make a quilt of Andy's clothes, and Andy's clothes sits in a pile in my bedroom today.
Right.
And it's, and we're only a few months apart. Andy died just a few months after Christian. But yeah, so you are not the only one, because I can't handle the idea of having them cut up yet. And I don't know. It's so weird. And I've seen beautiful quilts. I went to see my friend Chrissy, who's been on the show down in Tennessee. Actually, I visited her. And she showed me these beautiful quilts. And I thought to myself, oh, you should do it. You should do it. Give her the stuff. And I just can't do it yet.
I'm the exact. I mean, I've paid for them. And it's just, I just cannot. So she may never get that quilt that I had ordered her for Mother's Day that first year. She may never get it. I don't know. I've never even told her that story. So it's so funny. But
so now she's going to find out this way.
Right. But yeah, Mom, you got a quilt at some point, in your life, you might get it. I don't know.
I'm getting closer, though. I do have to say I'm getting closer.
Right.
To being able to do it. Uh-huh.
I want to touch on life after Christian.
Yeah.
I think it's so important. And a lot of it's funny. I mean, a lot of it, you have to kind of laugh at some of it because it is just, the things people say to you and the things that you do. You just feel like you got to do something. Like there's something that you should be doing to make the pain go away.
Right.
And I think that your story, I went to a grief group like
right away. Yeah, me too. Yeah.
And I went.
And people think you're crazy that you're there that early in some ways too, don't they?
Absolutely.
Oh, yeah.
But I've never gone back to this one. And I am in no way when I say this, because again, everybody grieves differently and I understand this. This just was not for me. The one I went to, it was at this church here in Memphis. And it was the only one I could find. And I would be interested in possibly finding something, figuring out something else or creating something at some point might be good. But when I got in there, it was all older women who had lost their children like 40 and 50 years ago. Mm-hmm. And many of them, and again, I am no counselor. And this is why I think that grief work is so important and that people talk about it, because I know like different generations, there's such a stigma on like mental health and, and again, I'm not a physician, but these are just my views on things.
Yeah, I think you're totally right. Mm-hmm.
These ladies, a lot of them have not gone back to work, had not done anything.
Yeah.
And to me,
they're stuck.
They're stuck.
They're stuck.
And it was, and a lot of their children were adult children who passed away, 30, 40 years prior. One lady, her son had passed away in the 70s. And it was devastating for me because I was just like, I don't want to be, that's not who I want to be. I don't want to be, I want to enjoy my life. And boy, I mean, there are some guilty, there's some guilt along with that, but
that's very similar to what Tom, Kevin's dad, had said, that he had been going to one for a while and he was realizing the same people were there all the time, telling the same stories in the same. It's just like he just realized they're stuck and I don't want to be stuck. And so I need to kind of go. And this is why I really like the support group that I went to with Starlight, because they have, so they're 6 weeks and it's basically a 2-year program. So they repeat the curriculum every 2 years. So it's not like you can't go longer than that, but their goal is no one's going longer than 2 years.
Right.
Because you have worked through these things.
Right.
And seen some improvement in your life. Not that you're showing up week after week after week after week and just be in the same spot.
Exactly.
I mean, that would just be sad.
It was. In my mind, I was just like, it may have helped me in a way because that's not where I did everything to make sure I didn't end up there.
Yeah. But it's terrifying though, right? It's terrifying.
Right. No judgment for the people who do end up there. I happen to just have a really great support system. My husband's family is amazing. My family is super, we're amazing. I have a great support system. But I took Jaden with me to that meeting as well, which was awful. And some of them,
because they had children's groups or no? Or he just went with you?
They said that there would be it was open for anyone. So in my mind, it was, people my age, Jaden. I mean, it was just, and that's what in my mind it was going to be. And it was not. It was just all, ladies probably in their 70s. Uh-huh. And they actually told us stories. And I'm very sorry, but that some of their kids would come to visit them and like comb their hair and things. And I know. And again, there's no judgment in that because it's very real to them, and that's fine. I remember I got in the car and I looked at Jaden and I said, Jaden, I am very sorry for this. And I said out loud, Christian, do not ever touch me. I am not ready for that. And I will probably never be ready for that. Do not touch me. Do not put your hands on me. But after that meeting, I had to go to Target that night and buy Jaden an air mattress because he slept in our room for the next 4 or 5 months after that, because it was just, I don't know. It was sad, and it was depressing. And, you know, a lot of the ladies had talked about how they had nervous breakdowns and all this. And I was just like, oh my gosh, I don't want to have a nervous breakdown. You know, I want to do what I need to do to make sure those things don't happen to me. And that's what I have really focused on. You know, I think I have some friends who are stuck in different stages. I've met some great people. I've done some, probably about a couple of months after Christian passed away, I did a press conference with the Tennessee Highway Patrol about the importance of seatbelts and how seatbelts are for everyone. I volunteer with the group of drowsy driving moms. Their son had passed away. Someone fell asleep at the wheel and actually ran over him and killed him. So they, you know, do drowsy driving awareness. And, you know, everybody talks that when I get on a stage and talk, and I've done some news shows and things. And when I get on a stage, people are just like, you're so early in your grief. You know, how are you doing this? And I say, well, it's really important for me to talk about him. Yeah. Because I think it's so important. And, you know, and as silly as it sounds, if Christian had to die, because I have such a faith in people, you know, and I'm glad that that Christian was, you know, Memphis, it's Memphis. And I'm just really glad that Christian wasn't hurt or like murdered, you know, or, you know, whatever by someone. Because that would have definitely taken something from my spirit, I guess is the best way to say that. And if anybody had to die in that car accident, I'm glad that it was Christian. And I hate to say that as well.
You know, I think I totally understand that as well. My husband and I said really shortly after Andy died, even though obviously it wasn't Andy's fault, he wasn't driving the car, it wasn't anything to do with that. But we did say, if somebody had to die of our kids, it's good that it was Andy. And the reason that we say that is because Andy had terrible anxiety and all of that, and thought, we just felt like, a little bit like you said, if Jaden had died, you would have lost them both. If Peter had died, I feel like we'd have lost them both. If my daughter Catherine had died, I think there's a decent chance I could have lost them both. Just because he just was so much more anxious and had so much more struggle. It feels bad to say, if I had to pick one, that's the one. But in some ways it kind of had to be. It had to be Andy, because I don't know, he just wouldn't have been able to handle losing his siblings, I don't think.
Exactly. Yeah. And that's, you know, and that's how that is. And, you know, you have the people who say, so I'm allowed to say that, but nobody else better say that to me. Right. Because I had an aunt that came up to me and said, aren't you just so glad that you have Jaden still? And I was just like, you know, I mean, which one of your kids would you give up? Yeah. I know. Like, don't say that to me. And I tried very hard not to be, you know, ugly with people when they say stuff like that. And I have done a really good job, but it's just, you just cringe, you know. And, you know, my dad even asked me if Christian was baptized, and he wasn't, but I said yes, just because I was terrified of what he would say if I said no. And then when I said yes, he said the most horrible, he's like, oh, well, thank goodness, because, you know, now I know he's in heaven. And I was just like, he was a 16-year-old kid. You know, he was exactly who God, you know. It's funny because he had Muslim friends, he had Catholic friends, and one week, you know, he'd be not eating for Ramadan. And I'm like, when did you become Muslim? You know, and then be attending like mass, or, you know, and just, he was exactly what God designed him to be. And I think it's important, that people don't say things, I know there's no way to change people. So I guess us having these conversations, it just kind of helps, to
Yeah, I think it
take it
helps.
with a grain of salt, just because people just don't have I don't want to say they don't have the sense, but they just don't know what not to say. And they just feel like they can say whatever is the first thought that pops into their head.
Yeah.
But one really great thing is, Christian's friends spoke at his funeral, and Alex, who is actually Jonathan's brother, and Jonathan was in the car. Alex, he said, how amazing is it that Christian had his last meal with his two favorite people, Jonathan and Jaden. And like I said, and that's why I told that, because it was 3:00 in the afternoon. There's no way they were hungry enough for a buffet, but I was like, whatever. I'm not going to argue about it. Whatever. So I look at that, and it's, it's kind of sweet that was their last meal together, that they all sat down and enjoyed a meal, like one last thing that, brings some sort of peace, I guess. But it's been really hard on Jaden, because, Christian was his big brother. So he looked up to him, and it's been hard for me not to, I'll buy something and say, well, here, Christian would have loved this. And he's like, but I'm not Christian, so it's been hard for me to not make him want to like the things that Christian likes. Things like that are things that I'm having to work through. Like I said, I have a friend who is stuck on and anger, like the anger, I was very mad at Christian for a very long time. And I really still haven't been to church.
Mm-hmm.
I'm pretty mad at God, honestly. And I think that's okay.
Yeah.
I think that, he gets it.
And he can take it. He can take it.
Absolutely.
Mm-hmm.
Me and my husband, I've honestly been a couple times, but I just cried the entire time. So I wasn't present. I'm not a bold enough person that I would have just gotten up and walked out. So I just sat there in my seat and bawled the entire time.
Oh, I cry all the time, and then I hide. So I hide in the church. So I will escape. There is a little door that you can go into the kitchen, because we have this time where everyone says, peace be with you, over and over. The sharing of the peace. And I hate the sharing of the peace, hate it. Because it just seems superficial, and you've already, you're shaking somebody's hand and then looking on to see who the next person's hand you're going to shake, and you're just like, peace of the Lord be with you. I can't handle it. So I would hide in the kitchen every single time. So the pandemic in that has been such a blessing to me, because they don't have... They're barely even having church. There are hardly any people there. And during the passing of the peace, you're supposed to just wave and not go up to anybody. And it's great, because no one tries to hug me. No one tries to say anything to me. No one does any of that. So when the pandemic's over, I don't know what I'm going to do. I don't know whether I'm going to shake people's hands or let people hug me or still hide in the kitchen. But, I've got a little bit of time yet.
Exactly. And, and I know that's, joking about that, but the pandemic is also, because the first year that Christian passed, that very first year, we weren't in a pandemic, and his friends came over all the time. I fed them all the time, and now it's kind of, I don't want 20 teenagers, and I would love to have 20 teenagers at my house, but we're in the middle of the pandemic. So there's only so much allowed. So that's kind of, I don't see the kids as much. And so that's kind of, and then they'll call, and want to get together, or on Christian's birthday, the first year we had a big birthday party. And then the first anniversary of his death, we had at the cemetery, we kind of had it's a small church. So they have a kitchen, and, it's a country church type thing. And so we had pizza and cake and, a celebration of life. And we didn't do that this year. And I felt, really guilty about it, but hopefully we'll get back to it. And then we're actually in the process of buying a home. We're moving in a couple of weeks. So that's really painful as well.
That is painful. Yeah.
And it's things Christian was not my husband's son. So my husband had a hard time because he wasn't feeling the same thing I was feeling. And he never really talked to me about that. I think he talked to his aunt or his mom or someone, and they kind of shared that with me. And, John shouldn't be feeling what I'm feeling. And it's
No.
completely, none of us are going to feel the same anyway. But when I say things, like, well, what if Christian can't find this? Like, what if he's looking for me and he can't find me? And it seems so unlogical and crazy to people who don't understand it, but I know you understand. You're like,
Yeah.
oh, I get it. It's not crazy at all. It completely makes sense to me. So I think that's really why I enjoy your podcast so much, and just because I have felt so normal, just listening to everybody else, and in a way, it's misery loves company, and I hate to say that, but.
Mm-hmm.
It has been. It's just, it makes you feel like I'm not alone in this. And the things that I'm doing are actually normal, that it's normal to feel this way, because it's tough, it's awful. Like everything about our lives, from Christmas to all of Christian's friends graduated high school last year. And that was devastating for me.
Mm-hmm.
I'll never have, as silly as it sounds, Christian was a 16-year-old kid. And I was just like, we preach like safe sex, stuff like that. And I'm like, gosh, why couldn't I just let him have a kid? I mean, and I know I'm joking, and I know that's silly, but you just wish that there was something of him left.
I know.
And it's, of course, his memories are there and his love, and it'll always be there. But it's like, I wish that I had another little mini Christian.
I know. I felt that way too. Like going to that grief support group at the beginning, there were only 4 of us who had younger kids.
Mm-hmm.
One died at 14, 12, 7, and a baby. And everybody else lost their children as adults. And they all had kids. And I found myself so jealous of that. So jealous of saying I can look, you can look into your grandchild's eyes and see your son or see your daughter, and how special that must be, I just felt a little jealous, feeling like, they could look into those grandchildren's eyes and see their kids a little bit. And I wasn't ever going to get that,
Exactly. Yeah. So it's tough. Like I just, I know that sounds awful, but it's just like, I wish I had a grandkid, It's 16. I don't know. And not to say, please don't, allow your kids to do that, just in case, because it's not what I'm saying. But you look back and you just think, why on earth didn't I just, I want something left of him. Yeah.
Yeah. It's just tough.
It is. It's tough, and there's no right way to do it. Like I said, and I always hate to, I always feel like a horrible people, and there are very few people I could ever say this to, but I have one friend and she's a good friend, and obviously I don't mean any harm in it, but her son has had so many accidents, like really bad accidents. And it's just like, my kid messed up one time. And it just seems so unfair. And I do not wish this life on anybody.
Of course not.
When you have people who like post on Facebook, like social media is the worst at times. And people post on Facebook and was like, oh, my kid, God was with my kid today, and saved them, during this wreck. And I was just like, well, I feel like God could have saved my kid.
Yeah.
It's very selfish.
Yeah. It's hard, I think, going past any car accident. We just went past one again yesterday, and then it got, my son talking about somebody was in a car accident, and it just brings it up every time, because you just think, especially because in our case too, just like with Jonathan being pretty fine, we were all pretty fine. Peter and I had a concussion, and Eric had a cut on his head, and I guess had a couple burn marks, but almost nothing. And then to have Andy die, I mean, it's just doesn't seem right somehow that I can just walk away, and I don't have any scars on my body at all to even show that I was there, and yet he died.
Exactly. And it's not fair. It's awful. And, I don't know. It's just, we'll never make sense of it. I mean, why
No,
Why
you
them? Like,
can't.
why were they chosen? And I know maybe one day we'll get the answer to that. I don't know. And one thing I like to think about, I have wondered at times if you're only allowed so much love, you know, in your life. And maybe Christian had just topped out, you know, and he just was needed somewhere else because, you know, like I never knew how much he was loved. I mean, I knew how much I loved him and how much my family loved him. But at his funeral, and I have a video of it, and I've never watched it because they sent it to me. I've never watched it. One day I hope I can. But it's just, he was so loved. I mean, so many people were there, and so many people I'd never met, and people that I'd never met spoke at his funeral and had such great things to say. And he had such a big impact on people that I just like to think that maybe he was just topped out on the love. And, you know, and I guess that's just what I like to think.
Yeah. And if it gives you some comfort, that's wonderful.
Right. Because he made such an impact on people. And I never knew that. And I would have never known that had because he never told me, you know, oh, Mom, I'm making an impact on people's lives. I mean, like I said, he would be mortified if he knew that his friends were at my house, you know, often. Like, he would not have liked that because he kind of liked to keep them, you know, moms are embarrassing. So he kind of liked to keep that part separate. But the people that spoke at his funeral, he has such an impact. And then when the kids come to the house and tell us stories, and I'm not going to keep long, but one of the stories at the funeral, it was a story of they were playing football upstairs in Christian's room, and they went to throw the football, and Bryce fell through our wall. And and Christian hung a poster over the hole so that we would never know. And we never knew until the funeral. So we went after the funeral. It was the first thing I did. I went home and I took that poster down, and there's a big, huge hole in my wall, and it was like a human-sized hole. And there was a human-sized hole in my wall, and we just kept that hole covered because we're getting ready to sell our house. So it's been 3 years, and that was one of the most painful things. And it was just a funny story, you know, that he told on Christian that day at the funeral, and everybody laughed. And they were like, did you know that? And I said, absolutely not. I'm going to have to go home and see. And I took down that Spider-Man poster, and there is a great big hole in the wall where Bryce had went through it.
Wow.
But so great stories. But again, you know, this has been so helpful. And I love talking about him, and I love hearing other people talk about their angels because it's.
Well, I loved hearing about Christian too. Just hear about what an impact he had, and just about you and how things have been since. So thank you so much for sharing him today.
Absolutely.
Thanks for coming on.
Yeah. Thanks for having me, and thanks for what you do. I mean, this is, you know, I know that it may seem just like something you're supposed to do, but you're helping so many people out there. And I think it's very important for us all to realize that there's no right way to do this.
Right.
And that we're all more similar than what we think, like things that we think that we're crazy for. But, you know, it's like, oh, there's somebody out there that's just going through the craziness with me. So it's great.
Thanks for listening to Losing a Child, Always Andy's Mom. Please subscribe to the show on your favorite podcast player. We are always looking for new show ideas. If you'd like to be a guest, know someone who'd be a great guest, or have a show idea, please email us at marcy@andysmom.com. Be sure to visit the webpage, andysmom.com, for more content, including Marcy's blog. There you can also sign up to receive updates via email. Together, let's work to inspire hope, one day at a time.